Hi, welcome to this video where I'll be talking to you today about the TRIRIGA UX framework, release 3.5.2 enhancements. Before we get started on what's new for release 3.5.2, I wanted to take a moment for those who might be new to the UX framework to just talk briefly about the goals of the UX framework. The UX framework is based on Google Polymer, and we extend Google Polymer with components which interact with the TRIRIGA server, components like TriPlat DS, TriPlat Resource Calendar, as well as other components, handle some of the details around saving a record from a client to the server or retrieving records from the server to the client. We extend Google Polymer with components which are needed by TRIRIGA Perceptive applications. Some of the things that applications in TRIRIGA typically might want to do is allow you to pick a date and a time, or allow you to search for items in TRIRIGA. And lastly, we extend Google Polymer with components which make developing UX applications easier. Components like TriBlock app layout are designed to offload some of the complexities that you as an application developer might need to handle. This video will focus on the 3.5.2 enhancements. See the reference material for content included in prior releases. So let's get started with what's new in this release. We updated Polymer to version 1.6.1, and the Google components that are included as part of the UX framework are now at their version as of October 20th, 2016. We made updates to the default styling to match the TRIRIGA style guidelines. This includes using shades of blue that match our style guidelines. But in general, you may notice some small changes to shades, but hopefully you'll notice that many of the components are now more consistent regarding their defaults that they use. Along with that, we've made improvements to styling and UI characteristics, including some new mix-ins and properties that allow you to more easily change the default styling if you choose to use your own colors scheme or other styling choices. We add support for additional TRIRIGA field types. We improved the data transfer between the client and server. That sounds pretty broad. I'll cover the details in a few slides. We officially support all formerly experimental building blocks now. And we implemented some data source-based licensing. So if we take a look at the components as a glance, I've separated the components here by release. Our initial release of the UX framework was in release 3.5.0. You can see that we progressively made changes across each of the releases. 3.5.1.1 was actually a fix pack, but we added several new components in that release. In 3.5.2, in addition to adding some new components, there were some components that were fairly significantly changed that I've noted on this, that I've included on this slide as well. And we're continually making smaller changes that you may not necessarily notice to all of our components. This is not intended to be a list of every change that was made to every component. And we separate out components versus building blocks. Components are used by building blocks, which combine components to create a higher level functionality or a more complex functionality. You can see here that in 3.5.1 we added several experimental components, and now in 3.5.2 we added TriBlock app layout but we also removed the experimental tag from all of the experimental components that were released earlier. So let's now dive into each of the bullets that I talked about earlier on slide 2. First of all, how are we improving our styling and UI characteristics? The triplat calendar container component now has properties for controlling the borderline, for turning the header on and off, and for fitting the calendar within a parent container. The triplat date and triplat date time picker now give the application control over whether a clear means to set the value to null or set it to an empty string. Some applications have a preference, so that's controlled by the application now. We support hiding the floating label. We support more customizable labels. We added a time zone property. And now we have fewer clicks to set the time. And also we just generally added more CSS properties for improved styling or flexibility with styling. We also have a new component called triplat DS search input that's more customizable and has improved mobile support over its predecessor, the triplat search input. And we'll go into a deep dive in a separate video on that component. We also support new input types. We now have a triplat duration, which supports the TRIRIGA duration data type. We have a triplat file, which supports the TRIRIGA binary data type. And we have a triplat note, which is a read-only component that supports the note data type. Let's take a break and let me move over to a demo system where I'll show you these fields in action. Okay, so let's take a look at a live system with some of these changes. So the first change that I want to show to you is the change to the calendar container. For that, I'll use the doc page for the calendar container. You can see the code over here for the doc page. We have a div that's 75% width, 75% height. We've got a few properties set. Disallow weekends. We've got a restrict to date list. We've got a valid date list. So the header is one by default, and it's this blue section up above the calendar. And you can see that the calendar kind of has three sizes. It has this medium size. As I make the window wider, it has a larger size. And as I make the window smaller, it has a smaller size. So three sizes for the calendar container by default. If I go over to the demo page and add our two new properties, fit width to parent and hide header. Let me save that. Let me clear the cache. Get back to the demo. You can see now that we don't have that blue header any longer. That was controlled by that hide header property. So now we hide the header. And also, as I make the width wider, you can see the calendar gradually becomes wider and gradually becomes smaller. So that's our fit to width, or fit width to parent property. Next, I'll talk about our date time picker. I won't make any changes to the demo page itself, but I'll let you see what our demo page looks like. And we'll start by focusing on this last demo. You can see that now, as part of the label, we've got a play arrow. So if I go to our demo page, you can see that now we have a play arrow there before the label, or the label consists of the play arrow plus the word start. Also, with no additional properties or customization needed, if you're familiar with our old date picker, we had a separate panel for the time selection. Now time is below the calendar. We have plus and minus for the time, and you can still go and select the year, but there's actually one less click for the year too. Previously, I believe you had to click an OK. Now you just select the year, and you're back at the calendar. So those were the changes. There were some minor changes to the hover. You can see now when you move the mouse over to cancel, the color of the cancel button changes, and the color of the done button changes to indicate that you're hovering over those buttons, and if you click them, you'll take that action. So that's all I really wanted to show with the date time picker. We have a new component, triplat file. We've done a lot of work on the demo page for that. You can see the code here for what's needed for the triplat file. We've got here we've also got the capability of a label that shows not just the binary field, but also shows an icon as part of the label. What you would expect for an upload. You have the picker for the upload. You can have a drag and drop area. So real robust functionality with our triplat file. For triplat duration, I'll show you that in a couple of ways. We've got a really nice demo page for that. You can select, it's got various customizable ways to look at things. You can select default periods for the year, month, week, day, hour, minute, second. So this is kind of the full duration picker. You have the plus, the minus. You can have it read only, and you can even control the looping. To see that really in action, we'll go over and look at a sample application that we wrote for reservation. I'll log back into here, I think. And we'll go ahead and create a new reservation. This application was really designed for a mobile device. It also works on desktop, but it was primarily designed for mobile devices. Let me see. So if I pick a recurring meeting and we pick the duration, you can see here we allow hours and minutes. Hours goes all the way from 0 to 23. Minutes, we don't loop, we just go from minutes upward. And you can also type in here as well if you wanted to make this 2. So that's our duration. For the note field, I'll go to just a small, simple application that I have. I just created this note element, and we can see here in the Space app, if I refresh it, that we get this rich text in a note area. I've even colored the background to make it more noticeable. You can see I don't have the ability to edit this, but it's displaying the note that you created in the TRIRIGA form-based application. And that's all I wanted to demo for this part. Okay, so let's continue working through the list of new enhancements that we made for this release. Next up is how we improved the data transfer between the client and the server. So first off, one of our main components is TriPlat DS, and the current user data source type is now writable. Previously, that was a read-only data source. We now support having default value metadata from the data modeler being sent down to the client. We support multiple record IDs can now be passed as context, and additional context is available for the resource calendar. We have a new component called TriPlat DS Core, which gives you a lower level of control for advanced users. And although it was included previously, I'll also include it here. TriPlat DS search input gives you more control over the data that you're gathering for searches, and you can see a separate video for a deep dive on that. So what else is new? We've made some enhancements to the TriPlat graphics. We've added plugins for a layer manager to allow you to turn on and off layers. We've added a legend plugin, and we've added pins to denote people and assets. And you can see a separate video that goes into a deep dive of the new TriPlat graphics plugins. For TriPlat icons, we now have 228 icons in our IBM icon sets. For TriPlat image, we have a property to control its position now. We have a new component called TriPlat incremental input that you saw as part of the demonstration of the duration component. It uses this component for its plus minus selectors. We have a TriPlat loading indicator that allows you more control over the spinner. We have a TriPlat login that provides an alternative login similar to how the form-based TRIRIGA provides an alternative login. We have a TriPlat resource calendar, which provides access to the reserve resource calendar. We enhanced TriPlat UOM to now give you the ability to not just see the unit of measure, but you can actually change the unit of measure. And we have a new component, TriPlat Weather, which provides weather using the Weather Channel API. And as I mentioned earlier, we've changed our license checks. A user must now have at least read access to all data sources in the UX application to access the application. If you want to perform an action or an operation, the user must have full access to the data source action. So now let me jump over to my demo system again and show you some of these components in action. Okay, so now I want to demo some of the components that we just talked about. We'll start out with the TriPlat DS default metadata. So what I've done is I've taken the application we used in the previous demo. I've just added a couple of things. I've added this include metadata and added a property that binds to where we're going to store that metadata. And also I've dumped that metadata using the TriPlat debug. And I'm going to display it in part of the application. So I'll make sure I save that. Then we'll refresh the application. And you can see here that I have the size, the length of that string as it's defined in the data modeler. If we go down here and look at the data, you can see that the metadata is stored within, for me, it's stored within this field metadata. And I've got various fields for which I've got the metadata. And for this name, you can see I've got no default value and I've got a size of 100. We support various types. You can see the doc page for the types that we support. Um, but one of the primary uses we saw this for was if you have a string defined in the data modeler that has a certain size, you might want to prevent the UX application from allowing a size greater than that. And so that's one way of using this metadata. And next I'll show you the icons. For those who may not be familiar with our icon library, under triplat icon, if you go to the demo page, you can see the list of all of the icons listed out in alphabetical order. We've got several icon sets. The first is the IBM icon set, and you can see the value that you would want to pass to use each particular icon. Again, these are alphabetical. The second icon set that we have is the IBM Medium. So we've got a couple icons in there, IBM Large, and then IBM Glyphs. And these are various sizes. You can see the medium is 64 pixel native. The large is 128 pixel native, and the glyphs are 24 pixels native. And I say native because these can always be resized using, these are SVG and can be resized. And lastly, I want to demonstrate our weather application. I've already taken the liberty, and I don't want to show you my license code, but one of the keys here is that you have to put a license, you have to get the license code and store that license code in a property in TRIRIGA web.properties. So I've already done that. I'll go ahead and uncomment my weather section in my application here. And you can see here I'm getting the current weather. In one case, in both cases, I'm providing latitude and longitude. This happens to be, the first happens to be for New York City. And the second case, I'm additionally providing the units. In this case, the M stands for metric, and giving it the latitude and longitude of Melbourne, Australia. So I will save that. And I have WebView Sync running in the background that's going to update that on the server. So I'll give that a few minutes. Now you can see that I've got the weather here for New York City. It's 16 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And in Melbourne, it's 11 degrees Celsius and clear. You can see here that if I look at those objects, like the New York City object, you can see that I get various information that I'm not displaying right now. You know, whether it's falling, sky color or cover, sunrise, sunset, but it's fairly simple to use the component to get that information. So now we'll go back to the slides. Okay, back to the slide deck to finish up. As promised earlier, here's some links to some reference materials. The UX framework, you can find more information and documentation and videos on our UX framework on DeveloperWorks, and I give you the link for that here. I also invite you to make comments or post your questions to the UX Framework Forum on IBM DeveloperWorks, and I've given you a link to that here. And our UX Framework previous release training videos, slide decks, is available from the link here that I show. Hopefully you've enjoyed this presentation, and please make sure you don't forget to go view the videos for the deep dives on the search input and the graphics plugins. Thanks.